So welcome to today's social system mapping on-ramp session for today, September 14th, 2020. Today's hosts are me, Christine Capra. I'm the co-founder of sumApp and Greater Than the Sum, and Kara Martner, who is in a low bandwidth place, so you won't see her face live probably, or maybe not hear her voice much, but she's our tech support person. And so if you get stuck with anything, just feel free to ping her in the chat. And there will be times when whoever's presenting is busier looking at the screen, at what they're presenting than the chat. So feel free to put questions in the chat the whole time, and Kara will be kind of keeping an eye on them. And she may interject if she sees something that she thinks one of us should respond to quickly. Another thing I want to mention right here is you see under my name, you see this visioning, technical, and sense-making hats. And let me go back up, oops. And the reason for that, for those of you who are new to what we call social system mapping, the reason for that is because we realized early on that it takes a network to make a social system map, and it takes people with different perspectives, one of which is the visioning perspective, which is the person who sees the value and can say to people, hey, we should do this, and sort of has a vision of a possible future that the map can help with. Another hat that we refer to as the technical hat, and that's the person who gets the technology and is willing to jump in and grapple with Kumu and data and figuring out how things should work technically. And then the third hat is the sense-making hat, which is the person who can help a network see the value in their social system map and start to use it for understanding themselves as a system better, and for making sense of how to be in the network in a way that furthers the goals. And so, having discovered that each of these persons wearing each of these hats can be using the same words, but meaning very different things. We started to realize it's helpful to clarify which perspective I'm looking at something from. So for instance, you could say to me, how do I get started? And you might mean that in a visioning sense, and you might mean that in a technical sense. And if I'm replying in a visioning sense and you want technical information, you're going to get frustrated with me, or vice versa. And so we distinguish the three hats, and then we're calling it out in part because recognizing that an effective network has a lot of diversity in it, or significant important diversity in it, and recognizing that when you have that diversity, you do have different perspectives and you do have different ways of talking about things. We're sort of modeling that a way of just sort of labeling that diversity and then using that to help us understand where each other's coming from. So I tend to wear all three of those hats, but different people in the network some of them will just wear one or two. So that's why we have that there. So this is one of a monthly cycle of 3 weekly Monday morning meetings. The first one happens on the second Monday morning, which is this on-ramp session, which we're doing today. On-ramp is an opportunity to see a map that someone else has been working on or has created. So even people who are experienced mappers love to join the on-ramps so that they can see one another's work. It's also the best way to get an introduction to what is a social system map, and to just meet others in the community and ask some questions. So today we're going to look at Ben Roberts' Now What map. We'll jump into that in a moment. The second session of the month, which happens on the third Monday, is usually a deep dive conversation, which usually is we explore a deeper topic, or a bigger, a topic that will take a bigger conversation than we have time for in the on-ramps. And it's usually designed for people who already have some idea of what a social system map is. You're welcome to join, even if you haven't been in an on-ramp session, but you'll probably get more out of it if you have. This month, the session will be next Monday, and Jim Best and I are gonna work on, present, mostly Jim, using liberating structures to help with map sense making. The third session of the month is on the fourth Monday, and that's Tech Talk. And so that's for your technical hat wearers to really dig into some aspect of sumApp or Kumu or a feature of sumApp. And this month, we're going to talk about how to understand and use the @inherit setting in Kumu, which is, I don't know if, how many of you are using it, but it's really helpful, but also can really confuse you. So if you don't really understand how it works, it can get messy. So that's where we are in the cycle. If you want to learn more, there's a few different ways you can do that. And Kara has been putting links to our other learning opportunities. One is to be on our, those are signups, sign up links. So now she'll be adding the links for, you can opt in to be on our social system map, community of practice map. So that will give you a firsthand opportunity with the technology and actually seeing a map to dig into. You can join our Slack team, and which I think Carol will be putting a link to. Maybe is she like, maybe just looking. Usually she's putting links in there by now. Maybe her bandwidth is a problem. So we'll hope that those get in there soon. And then the last one is we have a knowledge base that you can check out. So we'll make sure that you get those links. And if they're not in the chat by the end of this session, they will definitely be in a follow-up email from Kara within the next 24, 48 hours. So we'll make sure that you have access to all those learning resources. Also, if you're stuck or confused, or you just need a thought partner to think through a process, every week I have a weekly office. It's a half hour on Thursdays, Central Time in the US from 5 to 5:30. So feel free to hop onto that, and just, there will be a link in Slack, and you just, a Zoom link, just hop on and we can talk. Okay, so for today's agenda, we're going to do chat intros in a minute. Then Ben is going to present his map. Then we'll have some time for questions and answers. And then usually when we have these sessions, we have an optional, the formal defined session lasts an hour. So we'll stop at the end of at the top of the hour, and we'll say goodbye to everybody who has to jump off the session. But if anybody wants to stick around and just dig deeper into a question that was brought up, or bring up a new topic, or just chat with us, we'll stick around. At least I will, and probably Kara will. Ben I'm not sure if Ben's got time to stick around today or not, but I'll be there. So once we get to the top of the hour, we say goodbye to everybody and just hang out if you want to talk more, and we'll be able to connect after that. Okay, and I see Kara's now got the community practice map link up, the Slack team link up, and the knowledge base link up. Thanks, Kara. Great. Okay, so for our chat, let's start with all of us putting our name, our pronoun, and our location into the chat. Assuming everybody's doing it. Yep, great. Thanks, Lauren. New York. Mm-hmm. Newton, Connecticut. Portland, Oregon. Katie's in California. In the hot part of the world. Currently. Benjamin's in Zurich. I think that's everybody. Oh, yes, and Mauricio in Cusco in Peru. Okay, so then let's, okay, thanks, Iwan. Am I saying it correctly? You feel free to unmute if you need to. Correct me. Okay, thanks. Cool. Okay, so let's now put in one primary network that you're part of or working with. Some of us work with a lot, but just let's pick the one that's top of mind at the moment, or most important to you at the moment. Network Weaver, cool. Okay. And then what's one network weaving challenge that you hope, at least, that social system mapping might be able to help with? Reiner. So a challenge that sort of is part of what brought you here today. Mm-hmm. Okay. Is that everybody? So as we go through the next, through Ben's presentation, I'm hoping that let's all sort of read each person's challenge and let's think a little bit about how what Ben shows us or what you already know about social system mapping might help inform any of these challenges. Yeah, having a team of folks with Kumu skills to share the tech hat role, that's a big challenge that I often have. So Maren, welcome.
Hello, I'm sorry
Hi.
I'm late. I'm working in Munich, Germany.
Great.
With Rainer too.
Cool, great. If you want to add to what Reiner said or any of these three chat intros, feel free to go ahead and put them in the chat. And while you're doing that, I'm going to move to the next slide, which is to introduce today's guest presenter, which is Ben Roberts, who is going to share his Now What map with us. Ben has been, he's probably our most frequent presenter for on-ramp sessions. And his map has been around for, I don't know, a year now. He's been using it and he's pretty active with it, updating it regularly, and I'll let him explain that to you. But I really appreciate his sharing and he's been sort of doing a little bit of pioneering in relative to process and social system mapping, and I really appreciate his sharing that with us. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Ben, thank you, and feel free to share your screen and take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Christine. I'm happy to be here once again and support your work. I mean, this having this tool has really transformed the Now What Global Gathering, and it has been a year. The first edition where we used it was October, November of 2019, which was already the third time that we were doing something called Now What, which began in March of 2019. Then there was a May and June gathering, October, November gathering, another one in this past April and May, and another one starting again on October 12th, running through November 20th. So these are global spaces for connecting and supporting one another, particularly oriented around kind of the network of networks of initiatives and individuals working on whole systems transformation. Our tagline, if you will, our theme is the art of being fully human in a time of crisis. And these gatherings happen mostly on Zoom, but they've had in-person dimensions. There's a lot of other online tools that we use as well. And so it's a little different context, right, than some of your more standard networks that are ongoing groups of people and organizations, working together around a particular context. This thing pops up and then it sort of takes a rest and then it pops up again. And each time it pops up, each edition is evolving and is different. And you have some people that have been, part of all of them, other people that are coming in, fresh each time, people that show up in one, skip one, show up in another, etc. So that creates some interesting challenges, I guess, in terms of how one uses a map like this. But I think in general, given that building connections or weaving social fabric, where I love the metaphor of the mycelial mat, in the forest of a floor, that it's a way to, I mean, the maps look like mycelium, right? So it's a way to really strengthen that by having that visualization, but not just that, the data that's associated with it too. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll take you on kind of a whirlwind tour of some different things. So this is the homepage for the last edition of Now What, March 23rd through April 30th, and it's actually going to be updated soon for the October 12th edition. So it'll still be at nowwhat2020.com. You can go there and play around if you want. So you see again that our theme of the art of being fully human in a time of crisis, and a short description that this is not only a global gathering, but also a gift economy, a space where we're looking to create a field of generosity that benefits everyone who shows up in it, where you're invited to offer your gifts, but also find ways to receive them. And that includes money, but also other things. We'll take a look at how the map supports that a bit too. So when people participate in Now What, they come to this website, and there's a registration link there. I'll just show you sort of this is a little bit more about kind of what we're doing, the different purposes of the gathering, the set of technologies that we're using. Here's sumApp plus Kumu. It's pretty crazy. I've been doing virtual convening for 10 years now, and I really wanted a space where we could just play and experiment and be out on the edge of trying lots of things. And if people get confused or not everything is for everybody, to have that be okay, rather than sort of a least common denominator approach to technology, that everything has to work for everybody and therefore we can't try a lot of stuff, right? So this is the opposite of that. You go to register, and you can see already why this gets tricky, that if you were part of the previous edition, there's actually a different thing to do, because you're already on the map and we just want you to update yourself. But if you're new, there's just a simple form that you fill out here. And then I take that information and I put that into the sumApp interface, and then send people a link to their personal page. So everyone has a URL that gives them access to their part of the sumApp database. And you've got this initial bio. So again, I had to put some fairly tricky instructions in for people coming back versus people that are new. Normally, you're just going to put in your picture and a little tweet about yourself. And then we have the profile section, which is the most elaborate. And one of the really, really powerful things about sumApp is just how much information you can collect, and then that you have the option to map or not. So a lot of this data, not all this data goes onto the map, but and it's used in other ways. And then over time, we've decided, what if we map that, and what could we do with this data? So I think another thing I should just back up to say that's a little different about what we do is we're using sumApp as the registration platform for an event. Right? And often you'll see that you'll have an event, maybe it's a conference, and you want to have a map of participants. You're registering on Eventbrite, and then you get a separate invitation to be on the social system map. And inevitably, when you do that, you'll see a significant drop off in participation, right? But here and Now What, everybody is on the map, unless in the registration box they check off that they don't want to appear on the map, which we do give them an option for. They still go into the database though, but I will check off the option in here under my preferences to not include them in the map. So one other thing to note here right at the top is to say, which editions of Now What have you participated in? And when we go to the map, you'll see that we set it up to default to the most recent one. So you don't see everybody, but there's quite a lot of people on there. We collect personal information, we collect work information, we ask them what brought them there, why it's important to be there. Here's part of the gift economy where we want, what's music that's inspiring you right now? What are some words that you want to share? What's a resource that you're finding valuable? And we compile and share all of these. And I'm not sure they show up in your profile on the map individually. We haven't actually sort of systematically mapped all of this, but they go into other resource tables. We introduced the idea of organizing into home groups in the last edition, and you'll see how this shows up too in a minute. It didn't quite take off, sort of being like a small little cluster that you would go through through Now What with. There's a group of people that collectively support the convenings, the Now What Collective, and you can say if you want to be part of that. This is a standard part of the template in sumApp is to list which skills you can offer and which skills you need, and there's sort of a basic template of those which you can also edit and change. So we went with that because that fit well with the gift economy as well. And then we collected some other info that we didn't use in the mapping. Let me just go back up here though and show you some things that other things that are key, right? That
Can I ask one question, Ben?
yes.
Can you mention, what if people have been through it from the beginning and how does the survey look when they come back?
Right.
If you were,
So if you're returning, I think I will have already checked off the box for you that says, and we have a little bit of instructions there. The main thing is that you check off, that you're part of the next edition. So it'll be in October, November 2021. But then I have changed the survey from time to time. And so this is one of the design challenges in using the tool in this way is how do you alert people to what's new? I mean, they will see, so they will see what they put in before. And actually, so here's something that I did you can see what happened in the last one. These were earlier questions. And instead of repeating them and having people, well, in some cases, these weren't relevant anymore, but I saved the data. I just put it down at the bottom and I said, don't mess with this. So they would see new questions at the top. Basically, they scroll through and they'll either see something has been completed and then they don't have to change it unless it's changed. Maybe they got a little older. But if this is all good, you just keep scrolling down, but then you might see something that's blank because it's new, right? So you don't have to fill out all this data either to, and not everybody does. But does that, maybe that answers the question a little bit. What the essence of what makes sumApp so incredibly powerful and useful is that it lets you simply enter all the data about yourself, but also about who you know, right? So you can see everybody that's in the map that said they want to be in the map. You can describe your connection to them, and these are all customizable. You'll see that we started getting playful with this and saying, maybe you met them through Now What, and we want to map that. Or what about someone you don't know but you'd like to meet? So that didn't occur to us in the beginning to add that, but you'll see in the map how that shows up, and it's kind of fun, and it's been quite valuable in some interesting ways. Then you can so if you've already established a connection, you can see that, and you can change it if that's changed. You can search for people as well, and there's a way to survey it. So if we're in the current edition, you just want to see, who you'd want to check that box off, which is why we have these instructions here. So again, these are levels of complexity because of the way we're doing this, that with your typical mapping, social system map, you wouldn't have to worry about. But the fact that this is all integrated and feeds directly into Kumu is really just super powerful, and was the essence of why this was great. Then there was an innovation that was roughly timed with, I think, the beginning of this year, to be able to add organizational data and have those be mapped separately. So organizations can have their own types of profiles with their own questions and different kinds of relationships between people and an organization. Well, typical, as you can see, of our pushing the envelope and what technology can do, we weren't just going to map people's organizations, we were going to map the home groups that they were doing. And we have something called engagement streams that define sort of different aspects of participation in Now What. So we want people to be able to say that they're a part of an engagement stream, whether they're in a lead role in it, or they want to participate, or they want some information about it. If it's a partner, there's only one survey for all these quote unquote organizations. So we actually had to kludge this to say, which thing is this in here? But we started to collect data around the middle of the last edition of Now What, which I'll show you in a minute, about some of these different things. And I'm really looking forward to this, developing even further, because it becomes a way to map your participation in Now What, to map networks participation. So if you're part of a particular network, that goes in here as an organization. And then within the larger map, which I will go ahead and show you now, you can cluster out and see which organizations are showing up here, and just who's in that, or who in my network is showing up into this space, right? So this is the full map that shows everybody that's on it from all 4 of the different editions that we've run. And the way that we'll just make it a little, oops, let's just show you the last edition. Why did I clicked March 2019. So very few people are in here from that. because we didn't even start using Kumu until the October-November edition, but we did sort of backdate and put some other people in there. So you can pick somebody here, you can click on them. This sidebar is often up that shows you, you know, again, we're seeing the information they put into that profile, right? The editions they participated in, whatever data they chose to provide. Here are the skills that they can offer, etc. If they gave us a song, we would see that there. And you can also then focus on that person and see specifically who they're connected to. Let's make that go away so this can get a little bigger. And so you see the orange lines, these are people who wanted to meet Naomi, or that she said she wanted to meet. If we zoom in a little more, we can see which way the arrow goes. Yeah, so she wants to meet Madeline Charney. I should introduce them, I know them both. You know, other people said they wanted to meet her, and if you come back here, you can see that. The turquoise lines are people you met through Now What, and if we go back to the whole map from this last edition, you can get a sense of, you know, there's a fair amount of turquoise and a fair amount of orange in there, and as you zoom in, you can see more of that. This was a really interesting kind of case too. How am I doing for time here, Christina? Because I could talk for more than the 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Here's David. He shows up and I know, oh my gosh, he said that he wants to meet 40 people and he hardly knows anybody. And that became the basis for my reaching out to him and learning more about him. And I don't know how many of these, you know, relationships he then consummated. My guess is, because you have to go back in and update it to say that. But it was a really interesting way to sort of enter a space. We hadn't even talked. He wasn't on any Zoom calls yet. And I guess, you know, just sort of in general, I think what that shows is that having this map created a whole different sense of the place that is Now What. I mean, it's one thing to have a nice website. We have a calendar. So here were the Zoom calls starting on March 23rd when the last edition opened. The first 4 weeks, as I said, it goes for 6 weeks. So it wrapped up here on the 30th. There were almost 150 Zoom calls over the course of this. We went particularly crazy around Earth Day with a 48-hour celebration. But, you know, that gives you a sense of place. The website does, but this, you know, this gives you a whole other different sense of who's here and what's going on. And that's also where I hope that the maps, this is the data of the home groups and organizations. We have a little code here. So this would be a home group that Mark tried to start, and you can see, you know, who wants to be a part of that. And then Mark is also connected to an engagement stream on Indigenous peoples. So, and for each of these, there's a little, you know, the sidebar can open up and you can see some information if it was there. Yeah, so we do have some explanations about that. So I'm hoping that this gets much more use and we start to see who's doing what within the system as well. Here's where the skills show up. So if you look at all of them together, it's pretty intense and crazy, and this might be for everybody, but you can just pick one of these. And we're trying to get a little drop-down menu to do it. Makes it a little easier with this many skills. You can just highlight one of those skills then, and you can see the dashed lines are people who need those skills, the solid lines are people who can offer them. And we've done a little bit with creating some live engagement to work with this data, or other processes to work with this data, so people can, you know, start actually proactively, you know, making use of what's there, and we're hoping that dimension is developed even further as part of the evolution of the gift economy in the coming edition. And show you one other little feature, which is the Geo Map. So you can, if you can see where people are located if they put their data into the system in a way that Kumu can read it. If it doesn't, you wind up in the Gulf of Guinea for some strange reason, so there's a lot of people there. But that's another nice feature. So maybe that's enough for now. I know that was a bit of a fire hose, but questions might take us back into some particular places here. Maybe I'll stop my screen share for the moment.
That was great, Ben. Thank you. So yeah, let's go ahead and I'm just going to look at, so I'm not seeing questions in the chat. Katie, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Thanks for sharing that, Ben. It's awesome. Such a great map. I'm wondering, with your Geo Map, do you have a problem with the screen coming up blue for people with slower speeds? Have you heard complaints about that? And what are you using
I
for
have
geo?
it, but I'm guessing that it's blue because it's looking at the ocean, and they have to, so they have to use the fit to screen option, right? Which
Well,
is
it's actually blue because in my map, I did a geo map and it used location, with people's addresses.
Mhm.
And because it had to send that to some kind of server to translate it to latitude and longitude and
Oh
then
wow.
send it back, the map was loading before the people came up on it. So if you reloaded it once or twice, it would work. But I've been getting a lot of complaints about that. It
Yeah.
sounds like it hasn't
That
been working.
hasn't happened. We didn't go that route. So this is what we went with, that you put in. It's a little tricky. If you're in the US, because of course we're the center of the universe, right? Um, you just put in town, comma, and the
Yeah.
two
So that
letter
we did
space.
it the same way.
Yeah.
We did it the same way. So
Huh.
so it then sends that information somewhere and it translates it to latitude and longitude and puts it on the map.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have
Yeah.
it. Yeah. So you say this with slower internet connections. I mean, in general, especially when you have as much data as we've got in here with all the different connections that are there, and other things, it needs some bandwidth to run well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and as it grows, I mean, this is a challenge we're looking at because I want to save all the data from people that are participating in past editions, but we're primarily using it, for people involved in the current one, and
Mhm.
we have.
Thanks.
Yeah. There are ways you can just export the data from one to another too. So we could just do separate maps for each edition in theory. Um, Maybe as this grows, we'll wind up doing that. Other questions?
So I was going to suggest, if no one asks, to just for those who are brand new to this, explain the relationship between sumApp and Kumu. What's going on there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So sumApp is the platform that had the profile information, and your image and all that, and where you indicated the connections that you had to different people on the map. And what it does then is it interfaces into Kumu so that that information automatically will become a map where each person is a circle on the map, and whatever connections they've indicated are shown on the map as well. And sumApp is super easy to use. I mean, if you've ever set up a survey, it's just a basic set of tools, and it's there's a few little things, but it's pretty simple. Kumu, on the other hand, there's simple ways to use it, and then there are very complex and fancy ways to use it. And to do those requires some knowledge of how to do coding within Kumu to decorate the map, is kind of the technical term that they use, or to create different views. And so that's where I'm still hoping to have a larger cohort of people supporting us. Christine and her partner were super gracious in offering support the first go round, along with Jim Best, who's going to be doing the call next week, I guess, on liberating structures. That he's been kind of the lead tech hat person for some of these things as well. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Another thought I was having is, as you were going through the tabs, I realized that it kind of looked like you were going to a totally different interface. And so I just thought it would be helpful to clarify how the views work.
Correct. I did that just so you wouldn't have to watch each
Yeah.
load. But these different views all, there's the simplest way we set it up is here on the sidebar that's the default when you come in. We link to different map views. So this is the main map, Geo Map, needs and offers, and entities. Those are what we looked at, and you can just get to them there. There's also a drop-down menu here that gets you to them, but it's got a lot of other stuff. Yeah. So, and this is very easy in Kumu. This part is easy to create and edit. It's some of the things like creating this drop-down and then adding October, November 2020 to that, and having the default be that that's checked off and not the others, which is the way it is. That requires some of these special skills.
Yeah.
Do you want to see how this map grew? That's kind of fun. If people don't have another burning question, let me change screen sharing, because I just, there's actually a way within Kumu to code this with time tags and watch the growth, but I just took screenshots of it. So this was the beginning. I don't know if I have I could check on the date, but this was before we even started with just the first set of people that were that were showing up and registering for that edition. And then you can see I'm in the middle here. It's pretty obvious who the lead organizer is, but then as we go along, you know, the complexity starts to grow. And then at a certain point, all of a sudden, you know, see now it's looking much more multi-centric. One of the interesting things we're working on process-wise is how to work with these people on the periphery that aren't showing any connections at all. You know, they certainly have connections. They wouldn't have been here otherwise, in all likelihood. But how do we reach out and build those? We created a little game called Ask the Now What Oracle that uses the map too. It was a fun way to just sort of ask a question, you know, something you'd like to know the answer to that would be valuable in your life or your work. And then we sort of randomly wander around the map and look at people's profiles and things and see what kinds of answers are coming from that. You can watch a little video of our doing that with one person. So I think that gives you enough of a snapshot there.
Cool. So Maren, do you want to say, repeat your question so for Ben?
Yes, so I have difficulties to understand the 4 time slots you mentioned from March 2019. I didn't capture it because you were for different. Was it the development of the tool, or was it different project stages? And looking at and looking at our project in Munich, we want to activate a quarter of Munich of about 50,000 inhabitants. So we start with a group already having a lot of experience because it's heads of the associations in the quarter who participated in a city development project for many years, and they decided to go on and meet half a year, two times a year. And now we start with 20 active persons, but not all already engaged in our issue climate change. So we want to encourage them to get more people to a meeting. And we are thinking about using this platform to connect them closer and via a dialogue digital tool, because they knew each other from working together in the analog way. And if it happens well, I can imagine that there will be perhaps 50 persons in 3 months and 200 persons next year. But is there a number of people where the structure begins to be intransparent because there are too many people? Do you have any experiences with that? And should we pre-structure the interests we want to sort people off? You have a structure of capacities, and so perhaps in our project it would be, I'm interested in questions of energy or greening or nutrition or something like that. Can one add your own structure into the tool?
So how about I'll respond to the part about quantity, and then I'm thinking Katie and Ben, both of you probably have thoughts about could respond to the last part of the question. So the visual structure definitely becomes less and less readable the more people you have in the network, but the real challenge is that the technology can't handle it. So right now, if you're trying to move data from sumApp into Kumu online using the live link so that it's constantly being updated, the limit is somewhere around 1,500, a densely connected 1,500 people can be handled. But so sumApp limits your number to 1,500 just so that, because that's all that will work. So we're just clear about that up front. That's how much you can use in sumApp. And, but it has to do with how fast the data goes through the network and how fast Kumu can load it. When you get to even several hundred with fairly densely connected people, the map loads really slowly. So we're always working on finding ways to speed it up from the sumApp end, but there's nothing we can do about the Kumu side, except hope that it gets faster, and look at other mapping tools for huge data sets. So, but my thinking about that is when you get to that point, then that's the time to start. You know, when you get that big and when you get that many people wanting to be on the map or that you want to have on the map, then it's the time to start to think about maybe segregating them into separate maps. And but I wouldn't worry about it until you have a big volume, but just to know that that's there. We
Big
can't
challenge.
Yeah, well, I mean, and part of it is, you know, if it's going to take you 2 years to get there, the technology could have changed dramatically in 2 years. So there's no point in spending a whole lot of mental energy solving a problem now that you're not actually anywhere close to. But just knowing it will be there in the future and having that in mind is good. About the setting up the survey, Ben, you want to reply to that, or Kara or Katie? Excuse me.
Sure. I did hear, I mean, I lost a little bit of the audio for a second, but I heard a question about the different dates in our map. And so I can start by just clarifying that. Because now what is an event that happens over a discrete period of time, and then, you know, that edition is over, and then there's a new one. So it happened in March of last year, May and June of last year, October and November of last year, March and April of this year. Each of those, basically, I wanted a separate map of who participated in that edition of Now What. But we put all of the data into one larger map. And so that drop down let you just see, you know, everybody or only the people participating in the current edition. But it is a case where you might want to just start having separate maps, or using, there's a segment feature built into sumApp where you can just have, you know, you can just show a certain section of people in a different way than what we did there. But you can only be in one segment, right? So if it was clear how to divide people up into separate groups and you just wanted to have those, you know, work with that data and map them separately, the segments were, in this case, people might have been in multiple editions, so we couldn't segment them in that way.
So the other part of Marin's question had to do with, Marin, maybe you want to re-say it yourself, but how to start the categorizing of interests, or what's possible in terms of essentially the system magnets or the attractors in the system of what people might be gathering around. And I'm going to jump up and close my blinds briefly. So do one of you want to reply to that? Thanks.
I can show you an example of how we're doing that in Now What, and this evolved. So a lot of it, you know, can be trial and error and thinking about what's most useful, and talking to the people who you're going to be mapping can also be a really useful thing. You know, what do you want this map to show? What if it's made visible to you would be useful, right? You saw, I think I shared in the beginning, right? Yeah, over here on the homepage of Now What. What are some of the basic intentions people are coming to this gathering for? Growing relationships, learning, finding project support, etc. And we chose to put those into the survey. So you can check off as many of these as you want as your purposes for being here. And this is actually then in the map. They show up here. And if we just pick let's just look at Bree and zoom in on her. Well, here, so take a look at Christiana, right? You got 3 of these colored segments are highlighted for her. So that's seeking support for an initiative, building relationships, and I think it's receiving personal support. So that's one of the ways. These are decorations that are, you know, going to be added to one of them. And you could also show a map of just who wants to be of service, right? And who, or there's different flexible ways to map this data, but that's just one of them.
Yeah. Katie.
Yeah, just to add a couple thoughts to that. I think it's really, for me, it feels really important to do you know, a really robust planning phase for the map. Because for me, if you, you know, create a list of interests and then over time, you know, others come forward, it's hard to get people to go back to the map and update their interests. So I like the idea of, in one project I did like 20 stakeholder interviews, asking those questions that Ben said, like, what are you interested in knowing about each other? You know, in this case, it was around water issues. So, you know, I needed to create a framework around what areas of water are you interested in? Is it water quality? Is it groundwater? Is it, you know, flooding? Is it oceans? So, you know, it was asking like, well, what are the areas of water that you would want to see on there, and really kind of crowdsourcing those or doing a pre-survey with some closer partners. So that worked really well, and I would recommend something like that.
Maren, does that complete your question? Was there more in there that didn't get unpacked?
Yes, even if I don't know how I do it technically, but I have to look more closely at the instrument, at the tool. But if it's possible, it's good. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, it's totally possible. It's very simple. Yeah. Anyone else with questions that we haven't heard from?
I have a few questions.
Mm-hmm.
So one question's kind of related to I don't say promotion or outreach, but how do people find out about Now What? Do you advertise? How do you get the word out to bring more people to the, you know, to the community and to the event? So that's the first question. Second question is regarding tracking engagement, and how do you prompt people to use the mapping and engage with the, you know, the people that are part of the platform network?
Right. As far as getting the word out, you know, it's kind of a network of network space. So we have our own lists of people that have shown up, but there's also a set of networks that are with each edition that are involved and are sending out the message to their cohorts as well. And a lot of it, I think the most valuable process is really more personal, you know, directly inviting individual people and having them invite others. You saw all those different Zoom calls too. So you know, each of these engagement streams has its own kind of organizing team, and they're doing a lot of separate inviting. Now What's unusual too, and that sometimes people would show up in our events and they wouldn't know anything about Now What. They just knew that there was this particular call with Indigenous leaders and they wanted to hear that. It's like that mycelial mat in the forest floor. You don't even know it's there necessarily, but it's doing this connecting work. It's more important to us to do that than it is to get the maximum number of people in, for example, or even yeah. Anyway, we're still figuring all of this out, and it keeps growing and evolving. And then the second question was, how do we help them to make use of the data, or to go back in and update it? Which one?
Yeah, it's more, yeah, using the data, using the site, and just engagement in general. You know, like that's one thing that our network is looking at because we're going through like the next version of it, and to actually have people use the platform and connect with others, because as you know, we want to weave people together, but I don't, you know, we don't exactly have a full staff that can just be monitoring the site all the time. So I'm just curious, like, what you do to kind of prompt people to engage. I know you mentioned that there was some questions that you were kind of prompting. I can't remember if that was a question that you actually asked the community through the map itself, but yeah, like how do you prompt people to kind of engage more with the map and connect, not, you know, so that they're like enrolled in using the platform?
Yeah, I think I mentioned the Ask the Now What Oracle game that we created, which was something that, you know, you would do on a Zoom call, but the process took you into the map, and so that was one kind of playful way that we would encourage that. Another thing is that because, you know, we're taking the data from the map and using it in other ways too. So even if people aren't going in there, the fact that we're collecting that information lets us work with it. You know, I mean, Now What is primarily a space of live engagement. So we're talking to each other a lot, and our challenge is probably less. Well, I don't know. it's also true that a lot of the people you see on the map don't show up for the calls, or if we're doing in-person gatherings as we have in the past. Not so much now, may not be present for them. So it is an ongoing challenge, especially given how much pressure there is on people's time. In this next edition, I'm really looking forward to some, as I said, to the gift economy element expanding and working with a lot of these sort of skills sets that people have, needs and offers there, and using the map for that. Also showing who's involved in different aspects of Now What. So I think that when you have practical applications along those lines, then the map becomes more relevant to people and it gives them a context to go in. But I think you also, and I created little tutorials and guides to it, little game, other kinds of games you could play. So that was another thing. But I think having live calls that are hosted with a process and says, here's what we can see on the map and here's how we're going to use it today. That's sort of the edge we're looking to still develop and explore as the best approach.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah,
Yiwan, I'm wondering if you were, I can't remember exactly how you phrased your question, but it was about the applicability of the tools for your goals. And I'm wondering if you're sensing like how much alignment there is, if it feels really useless to what you were hoping for or moderately close or
I'm still kind of exploring, and I guess my curiosity is around, capacity. So how many people in a network makes it worthwhile to use the tool? I guess how small or how active people are, if you have a sense of that.
I have to say, I think it's so contextual. It really so much depends on the context and the goals of the network. And I've seen maps of 20 people that to me, I would be like, I wouldn't bother mapping that, but where the intention is to grow. And so that's just the core. And then over time it gets bigger, or they're using it really to dig deeper into understanding how the connectivity within that 20 people changes over time. So there are contexts where to me, I would think, why bother? And it's relevant to the people in that context, to them. And so it's a really hard question to answer, and maybe thinking more about what it is you're trying to, what the network's goals really are, and having a conversation about that with some of us, I think might be useful or not. But
okay.
Yeah, it's really contextual, so it's hard to say.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, well, we have another minute, and how about if I'm going to do a check-in and see who is planning to stick around for next half an hour, and then whoever is not, if you have one last burning thing that you need to say or ask that we can answer quickly before you go. Who's sticking around? Okay. Are you sticking around? Are you going?
I'm going.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, well, we'll just do a closing. So thank you so much. So let's all unmute and say our greetings, our farewell greetings for the day to each other, and then everyone who's going can pop off, and whoever stays can stay. So as soon as we're all unmuted, just say thank you. Have a good day.
Hallo.
Tschüss.
Dank. Tschüss.
Good
Thank you.
day.
Bye. Thanks so much.